Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Diana. Now I would like to explain about communicative language teaching or CTL. Okay, the first slide I want to explain about definition of communicative language teaching. Uh, As we know, communicative language teaching is an approach in foreign language teaching that emphasizes the concept of interaction both in the process and in the objectives of the learning process. The main characteristic of CLT is the combination of functional and structural aspects of language. Functionally, CLT emphasizes that Functionally, CLT emphasizes how the language is used, while structurally, CLT emphasizes the system of rules of the language. Even so, in its application, the functional portion is larger than the structural portion because the teachings on language rules are not given directly but are implied in the learning process. Okay, and the next CLT teaching theory. According to the communicative approach, so that the learning process can take place, it must be emphasized on the importance of the variables below. The first, communication. Communication is activities that involve real communication to promote learning. And then tasks, activities in which language is used to carry out meaningful tasks and support the learning process. And then meaningful language. And the next slide, the purpose of the communication language teaching method. CLT or communication language teaching has several objectives to be achieved, including students can use language as a tool to communicate, and then students can use language as a tool to express something, and then students can use language expressions appropriately when communicating. And then applications of communicative language teaching or CLT. In its application in the classroom, CLT uses every activity that involves authentic interactions both between teachers and between students and students. There are two forms of activities in the CLT class, including functional communication activities and social interaction activities. The first, functional communication activities that aim to develop certain language skills and functions but still involve communications. For example, how to express opinions, and then how to convey criticism and suggestion, and then how to ask time, how to ask for and give direction, and so on. And second, social interaction activities that emphasize the use of the language. For example, conversation and discussions, dialogue, roleplay, interviews, information gap, games, language exchange, surveys, firework, and learning by teaching, and so on. Okay, and the next slide about the advantage of communicative language teaching. And the advantage of CLT, the first about CLT is a holistic approach. This approach not only focuses on the traditional structural syllabus but also considers the communication dimension of language. And then CLT conveys passion and motivation to students in the classroom. And then CLT is a learner who emphasizes the interests and needs of students. And the last, in this world where information communication and information technology have advantage, Greatly, CLT can play an important role as an educator. And the next slide about the advantage. The advantage of communication language teaching. The first, this method is difficult to implement in a very crowded classroom. And then the teacher must be a person who has a very broad knowledge of both the foreign language and the mother tongue. And then inadequate and appropriate use of teaching materials can damage the learning process. And then the teacher's theoretical knowledge must be very good in terms of practice. And teacher monitoring ability must be very good. And teaching about the structural aspect of language is very difficult to practice in this method. And then the CLT approach focus only on fluency but not on accuracy. And then students who are weak and cannot use the target language will continue to make mistakes and eventually give up. And last, the CLT approach is very appropriate for intermediates and advanced classes. But for beginners or basic, this approach is not appropriate. Okay, I think enough. Thanks for attention. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.